In this story, Voyager 2 was never supposed to wake up again after so many years of silence. It had been drifting through the endless darkness of interstellar space, cold, quiet, and seemingly forgotten by everyone back on Earth. For a long time, there was nothing, just the vast emptiness surrounding it. Then, without any warning at all, it sent out a pulse that should not have been possible. The engineers who first received the signal thought it must be some kind of damage or random error at first. But as they studied the timing and the details more carefully, something became clear. Something had reached out and touched that signal. Something had changed it in ways that could not be explained by normal spacecraft operations. When the full data finally reached Earth, old records were pulled out, and a wave of alarm spread through deep space laboratories around the world. This was not simply a message sent from our probe. It felt like a response, and whatever it answered had been listening long before humanity ever noticed its presence in the void. The sudden awakening in the darkness caught everyone completely off guard. In this fictional account, Voyager 2 powered back on after 11 full years of total silence. And according to all engineering expectations, it should not have happened at all. No command had been sent from Earth, no reset had been scheduled, no system on the ground had made any attempt to contact or revive the spacecraft. Yet deep in interstellar space, where sunlight is almost non-existent and radio waves grow incredibly weak, the probe somehow activated itself once more. The long-enduring spacecraft, which had been exploring the universe for nearly 5 decades, suddenly appeared back on the tracking screens. Engineers in the story later described the moment as feeling deeply wrong, as if something that had been dead for years had suddenly decided to breathe again on its own. In our fictional universe, Voyager 2 was originally launched back in 1977, with a primary mission focused on flying past the outer planets of our solar system and sending back as much scientific data as possible. It successfully studied Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune in remarkable detail. The probe measured magnetic fields, radiation levels, plasma, and streams of charged particles during those historic encounters. After completing its main planetary tour, it was directed outward into the space between stars, a region with almost nothing in it. There were no planets, no suns, and no natural protection from cosmic radiation. Voyager 2 was never designed or expected to do anything active out there in the long term. It was supposed to simply drift, record background readings, and slowly power down as its energy supplies faded over time. In this story, by the year 2018, Voyager 2 had crossed the boundary of the sun's influence and entered true interstellar space. Over the following years, its available power continued to drop, and various systems were gradually shut down one by one to conserve what little energy remained. Then, in this fictional telling in 2023, after experiencing a series of technical faults, the spacecraft went completely quiet. For 11 long years, there was nothing. No signal came back. No heartbeat was detected. Mission Control officially marked it as inactive, and most people assumed that was the end of its story. Then, without any warning or explanation, a new signal appeared out of the darkness. At first, in our story, the signal was barely detectable. It was just a single, short, weak, but surprisingly clean pulse. It resembled a faint heartbeat echoing inside an empty room. The signal came through on Voyager 2's exact frequency, and that fact alone was deeply disturbing to the fictional research team. The probe simply did not have enough power left in its systems to send anything new. Yet somehow it had done exactly that. Engineers in this narrative initially assumed this must be some kind of glitch. Space is a harsh and violent environment. Cosmic radiation can flip bits in old electronics, causing unexpected behavior. That kind of explanation usually fits most anomalies. But this time, in the story, the details did not line up. The pulse arrived at a perfectly regular interval, and the timing matched Voyager 2's internal clock, which should no longer have been functioning properly after so many years. As the fictional team examined the incoming data more closely, something even more concerning appeared. Voyager 2's systems had not turned on randomly or through some chaotic failure. They had activated in a perfect, clean sequence, starting with power regulation, followed by memory access, and then the transmitter. This orderly progression mattered a great deal in the story. It suggested intention rather than accident. Random damage from radiation does not follow such precise steps, and failing hardware does not wake up in such a polite and structured manner. Then, in the story, came the real shock that changed everything. Inside the transmission packet, the fictional engineers discovered a file that should not have existed. Voyager 2 was never designed or programmed to create new files on its own. It could only send pre-formatted data blocks according to its original specifications. This new file did not match any known structure in the system. It was not sensor noise. It was not corrupted system logs. It was something else entirely, something that, in the world of this story, had been added from outside. As Earth continued to listen, the signal repeated itself every 6 minutes with no variation or drift at all. Each time, a low-frequency hum would rise slowly before the main pulse ended. When converted to audio, The hum sat just below the normal range of human hearing. It sounded heavy and pressing, like pressure slowly building inside a sealed container. The engineers in the story described it as feeling like a warning tone, not because it contained words, but because it carried a deliberate, purposeful quality that could not be ignored. Every possible check was run on the ground systems. No uplink command had been sent. No internal timer could explain the activation. No known failure mode matched the behavior being observed. Voyager 2 was an old spacecraft with computers, far weaker than a modern calculator. Yet, in the story, it was behaving as if something had carefully guided it step by step through the entire process. Then the second pulse arrived, and it was stronger, clearer, and carried more confidence than the first. The signal strength had increased slightly, even though the probe was moving farther away from Earth with every passing second. That increase should not have been possible under normal physics. In the story, it felt as if the source had adjusted itself deliberately, as if it knew that Earth was now actively listening. Silence followed for another 6 minutes, and then the signal returned once more. At that point, the fictional engineers stopped referring to it as a glitch. They began calling it an event. The awakening of Voyager 2 forced the story's experts to look far beyond the probe itself, because whatever had caused this reactivation had not come from Earth, and it had not originated from the spacecraft systems. It had come, in this narrative, from somewhere else entirely, out in the darkness. This event pushed the team to examine the signal in much greater detail, searching for any trace of what might have entered or influenced Voyager's transmission. The more they analyzed, the more questions arose, and the more unsettling the entire situation became within the story. The probe that had been silent for over a decade was now sending something new, and whatever had touched it seemed to have done so with purpose and awareness. This was no longer just about a lonely spacecraft waking up. It was about something much larger that had been waiting and watching in the void. The stalker in the darkness became the next focus of the story's investigation. The moment the fictional scientists turned their full attention to Voyager 2's revived signal, something else appeared in the data streams. It did not originate from the probe itself, but from the surrounding space. Deep space monitoring systems that continuously track particle movements and plasma disturbances far beyond the planets suddenly detected a large mass moving through the same general region as Voyager 2. At first it appeared to be nothing more than ordinary background noise, but as the readings were carefully cleaned and aligned with other data, a distinct shape started to emerge in the fiction of the story. Something was definitely there, something very large, and it was moving with clear direction. The object was detected roughly 500,000 kilometers behind Voyager 2. In the emptiness of deep space, that distance counts as relatively close. There were no known asteroids in that area, no rogue planets, and no documented debris fields, according to any real astronomical model. But within this story, the space around Voyager 2 should have been completely empty, and yet the readings showed a defined mass with a clear trajectory. Even more disturbing, the object was not simply drifting passively through space. It was moving with apparent purpose. As the story's engineers watched the tracking data update, they noticed that the object's speed was not constant. It adjusted itself in small, precise steps. Every time Voyager 2 experienced even a tiny change in velocity caused by solar pressure or plasma drag, the object would match that change. The delay between the probe's movement and the object's response was only a few seconds. That kind of immediate coordination should not have been possible at such a distance. It suggested in this fictional world that the object was either predicting Voyager 2's motion with remarkable accuracy or reacting almost instantly to it. Thermal sensors picked up nothing at all from the object. There was no detectable heat or radiation signature. Every known object with mass in space emits at least some level of heat. Even cold, dead rocks glow faintly in infrared. This fictional object produced none of that. That observation ruled out ordinary asteroids, planets, or any conventional spacecraft, using known propulsion methods within the logic of the story. The complete absence of heat pointed toward a system that did not waste energy in ways humans normally understand. When active radar pulses were simulated against the object's position, the return signals kept changing in unexpected ways. Sometimes the object appeared wide. Sometimes it looked narrow. At other times, it nearly vanished from the scans altogether. This meant its radar cross-section was shifting dynamically in the story's telling. The object seemed capable of altering how it reflected signals. It behaved as if it could bend light and radio waves around itself in real time, something no known material or technology available to humanity can actually do. As the different data sets were carefully layered together, a terrifying pattern became obvious within the narrative. The tracking lines showed perfect shadowing. The object stayed positioned behind Voyager 2 at a consistent angle and distance, adjusting smoothly every time the probe made even the smallest movement. It never overshot or fell behind. It simply followed with silent precision. One of the fictional engineers described the behavior as something hunting without any need to rush. Then, the most disturbing detail of all emerged in the story. When the object slowed down, Voyager 2 would slow down slightly just seconds later. At first, this was dismissed as coincidence, but it kept happening repeatedly. The probe's velocity would drop shortly after the object decelerated. This suggested some form of interaction rather than random chance. It felt, within the story, as if Voyager 2 was being pulled or guided inside an invisible field it could not escape. The spacecraft had no engines left capable of making such changes on its own. It was supposed to coast freely through space. Yet its motion now appeared directly linked to the object trailing it. The idea that an external force was influencing the probe sent waves of shock through the entire fictional team. This was no longer merely about strange signals. It was beginning to look like a demonstration of control. Once the object was confirmed within the story, the fictional scientists began searching through decades of archived space data, looking for any similar patterns. A young intern was assigned the routine but tedious task of scanning old Voyager 1 telemetry logs from the early 1980s. These were old, dusty digital records that many people had ignored for years. They were labeled as useless, outdated, and already explained. But as the intern reviewed the data line by line, one strange burst stood out immediately. In this story, back in 1983, Voyager 1 had sent a short, unexplained burst of static back to Earth. At the time, engineers had dismissed it as simple interference. Space is full of natural noise, and the probe was very far from home. The signal was archived, labeled as meaningless and then forgotten. When the intern compared it to Voyager 2's new pulses, his hands began to shake. The timing patterns were almost identical. The spacing between pulses matched closely. Even the rise and fall of the signal looked familiar. When the old static was processed through modern AI cleaning systems, in the story, the truth became impossible to deny. The AI stripped away random interference, and what remained was a clear, repeating pattern. It was not natural. It was structured, controlled, and carried the same slow, deliberate rhythm now coming from Voyager 2. This meant, within the fiction, that whatever was now stalking Voyager 2 had also been present near Voyager 1 back in 1983. It had followed both probes into the deep black for over 40 years, remaining silent and unnoticed until now. The intern dug even deeper into the records. What he uncovered made the senior scientists in the story fall completely silent. Voyager 1 had experienced a slight, unexplained slowdown during that same period. The change was small and had been attributed to sensor drift or aging systems at the time. No alarms were raised and no further investigation followed. That old slowdown now looked very different when compared with Voyager 2's recent behavior in the logic of the story. The pattern matched perfectly. Both probes had slowed down shortly after encountering the strange signals. The timing was too precise to be chance. Something had been near them. Something had influenced their motion without any physical contact. The realization spread rapidly through the fictional research community. This object was not new. It had not just arrived recently, it had been out there for longer than many of the scientists now studying it had been alive. It had tracked humanity's farthest messengers into the void and stayed quiet until the right moment. All of the evidence pointed toward awareness. This thing seemed to know when it was being noticed and when attention turned toward it. For decades it had followed in silence. Now it was no longer hiding, and that change suggested something important had shifted in its behavior. As this truth settled over the fictional team, the scientists in the story turned their attention closer to home, searching for any trace that the signal might have already reached Earth. That search revealed something far more alarming. The phantom pulse had already arrived. The first warnings did not come from deep space. They came from Earth itself. Late at night, in the story, radio telescopes on different continents began picking up a deep, slow echo. At first, each station believed it was experiencing local interference from weather or equipment issues, but within hours the reports began stacking up from around the world. The same pulse was being detected in North America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. When the data was aligned, the implications caused fear to spread quickly through the narrative. The signal matched Voyager 2's pulse exactly. The timing was perfect, every 6 minutes with no drift or error. This was not random noise. This was synchronization on a planetary scale. Whatever had been following Voyager 2 was now, within the story, directly linked to Earth. As the fictional scientists traced the signal's path, they observed something deeply unsettling. The pulse did not strike one location at a time. It spread across the atmosphere like a pressure wave. Communication stations felt it first. Long-range radio systems experienced brief dips. Satellite links stuttered momentarily. During each pulse, the air itself seemed to react in subtle ways. Power stations then reported tiny flickers in electrical flow. Nothing strong enough to cause blackouts, but the pattern was unmistakable. Every flicker aligned precisely with the incoming pulse. It felt, in the story, as if something invisible was gently brushing against the power grid, testing it, touching it, and then withdrawing. The frequency analysis erased any remaining sense of comfort. The pulse mirrored the natural frequency of hydrogen, the most common element and signal found throughout the universe. Hydrogen emits this frequency everywhere in a stable and predictable way in reality. But in the fiction of the story, this version was inverted. An inverted hydrogen frequency within the story's premise does not occur naturally anywhere in the cosmos. Creating it requires deliberate control, knowledge, and intent. It requires understanding how the universe normally behaves and then flipping that behavior. That inversion acted like a clear fingerprint in the narrative. It was unique and purposeful. It was not trying to hide. It was designed to be recognized. When the Earth-based signal was layered over Voyager 2's transmission, an even deeper layer appeared in the story. There was a second, quieter, slower, and more profound signal hidden inside the echo. This second signal only emerged after the Earth echo had begun. That meant within the fiction that Earth was no longer merely listening. Earth had now become part of an active exchange. The object in deep space was not only following our machines, it was now interacting directly with our planet using systems we depend upon every day. This was contact without any invitation or permission in the world of the story. The hidden message inside the signal carried even more weight. When the fictional scientists isolated the inner layer of the pulse, the room fell into a heavy silence. Buried within was a thin band of clean, structured binary code sitting where it had no right to exist. Voyager 2 was never built to generate anything like this. As the data was decoded line by line, the implications grew darker. The binary stream followed rules and repeated with clear purpose. When translated into visual patterns, the screens filled with precise spirals, tight lines, and sealed loops. These were not random shapes. They were constructions, following strict mathematical principles. The code was not static. It reacted to being observed, adjusting subtly each time it was analyzed. Artificial intelligence systems in the story identified repeating structures that behaved like commands waiting to be triggered. The signal was not simply a message to be read. It was a mechanism designed to force a response. It pushed against specific frequencies used by Earth systems, increasing pressure with each repetition. It was not politely asking if anyone was listening. It was demanding attention. The shapes contained coordinates pointing to a precise location far beyond the outer solar system, in a region that should have been empty. This was not an invitation. It was a marker. The final transmission from Voyager 2 in this story carried a collapsing spiral symbol repeated over and over. It resembled human emergency warnings, meaning danger and retreat. The object did not destroy the probe. It had contained it, redirected it, and sent a message. Humanity's exploration had, in the fiction, crossed an invisible boundary, and something out there had responded. And that is where the story leaves us, with a signal still repeating every 6 minutes somewhere out past the edge of the solar system, with coordinates pointing at a patch of empty sky nobody has explained, and with a question nobody in this tale has managed to answer, whether the silence that follows will last, or whether next time there will be no warning at all. It's worth remembering, stepping back out of the story, that none of this happened. Voyager 2 never went dark for 11 years. There is no shadow trailing it through interstellar space, no inverted hydrogen frequency, no hidden binary spiral. The real Voyager 2 is still out there right now, still transmitting real data on a handful of surviving instruments. Its actual story every bit as strange as fiction in its own quiet way. A 49-year-old machine running on a sliver of its original power, still returning genuine measurements from a region of space no human hand has ever touched. That true story doesn't need an invented stalker to be worth telling. It only needed 2 spacecraft, a narrow planetary alignment that happens once every 175 years, and just enough stubborn engineering to keep listening long after anyone expected the silence to be permanent.